The tray was empty, and it was the lightest thing I had ever held. I want you to understand that before anything else, because it is the whole story in one image. A woman in a silver gown crossed the marble floor of the Wexford College ballroom, looked at my plain dark dress and my flat shoes and the way I was standing near the wall, and decided in half a second what I was. She did not ask my name. She did not look at my face long enough to find it. She simply lifted an empty serving tray off the linen-draped station beside me, pressed it into my two hands, and folded my fingers around the edge as if she were doing me a kindness by giving me something to do. "Be useful, sweetheart," she said. "The refills are over there. Charity case to the end, Then she laughed, a small, bright laugh meant for the people behind her, and turned back to her table. I had carried 1,000 trays through that exact doorway, 15 years before. I had carried them full of champagne flutes and crab toasts and tiny glasses of soup that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and I had carried them with my shoulders aching and my feet swollen and my eyes down. Because that was the rule. You kept your eyes down. Not one of those 1,000 trays had ever felt the way this one felt. This one was empty, and it weighed nothing, and somehow it was the heaviest object in the room. Her name was Priscilla Ridgely. 15 years ago, she had been Priscilla Vane, the center of everything, the girl whose approval the whole class arranged itself around like iron filings around a magnet. Now she was the chair of the Alumni board, and she was wearing a gown that probably cost what I used to make in 2 months of catering shifts. And she had just handed me a tray and called me a charity case in front of a room full of people, exactly as she had when we were 19, as if no time had passed at all, as if I were a fixed point she could return to whenever she needed to feel certain of where she stood. I did not flush. I want to be honest about that, because for years I had imagined this room and imagined myself going red and hot and small in it, and instead something very quiet happened in my chest, a kind of settling. I held the tray. I watched her walk away. I noticed that her heel caught for a second on the edge of the rug, and she corrected it without breaking her smile. And I thought with no anger at all, she has spent her whole life learning to never let the smile break. A young man at her table glanced back at me. I recognized him too. Grayson Ridgely, her husband now, her boyfriend then, a tall, pleasant boy who had grown into a tall, pleasant man, the kind of person who never had to be cruel himself, because there was always a Priscilla to be cruel for him while he stood by, looking faintly amused. He gave me the small, apologetic shrug men like him give, the one that means none of this is my fault. And also, I am not going to do anything about it. I set the tray down. Not down the way you put down something you have been ordered to carry in defeat. I set it aside on the linen station, the way you set down a thing you are finished with. And at that exact moment, across the ballroom, someone tapped a microphone, and it gave a small electric pop that traveled through the chandeliers and the centerpieces and the 200 people in their good clothes. And the room began, slowly, to turn toward the stage. You should know who was actually standing there holding that tray, because the woman in the silver gown did not. That morning, 11 hours before Priscilla Ridgely decided I was the help, I had stood at the head of a glass conference table on the 14th floor of a building with my own name on the lease, and I had signed off on a product launch in 3 cities. Halsey and Company. We did corporate events and large-scale catering, the kind of work that turns a convention center into something people remember, the kind that runs a wedding for 400 without a single guest ever seeing the machinery behind it. I had started it with 1 food cart. I had 190 people on payroll now, and every one of them would have laughed out loud if they had heard a stranger call me useless. The food cart had been the menu from the drawer, finally made real, 2 years after I graduated, on a corner downtown. Soup in the winter, and good bread, and nothing on the board that I had not first made for myself at home until it was right. I sold out 3 days in a row the first week and cried in the alley behind the cart on the 4th. Not from sadness, from the strange terror of a thing actually working. By the 2nd winter, I had 2 carts. By the 4th year, I had a small storefront and a van, and my first real employee, a line cook named Marcus, who is still with me, who runs the largest of our kitchens now and calls me boss in a tone that has always had a little teasing in it. The first corporate contract came almost by accident, a tech company that ordered lunch for 40 and then asked, would we do a launch for 400? And I said yes before I had any idea how, and then I figured out how, which is the entire secret of everything I have ever built. Say yes to the thing that is one size too big for you, and then become the size of it. We did the launch. Nobody made a single mistake. The checks got bigger after that, and the events got bigger, and somewhere in there, the girl who used to carry the trays became the woman the trays were carried for, and I would be lying if I told you I had noticed the exact moment it happened. There was no moment. There were 10,000 early mornings. What I am trying to say is that none of it came from a fund or a name or a family or a wall. It came from the one skill that place had decided was the proof of my lowness. They watched me carry food beautifully for 4 years and concluded I was beneath them. I watched myself carry food beautifully for 4 years and concluded I had found the thing I was for. My chief operating officer, Soraya Kapoor, had been with me for 9 of those years. She was the only person besides my accountant who knew the real size of what we had built, and she was the only person on earth who knew where I was going that night. "You don't owe that place a single evening," she had said on the phone, while I drove the 2 hours north through flat brown autumn country. "You don't owe them an hour. You don't owe them the gas." "I know," I said. "Then why are you going?" I watched the road for a while before I answered her because I wanted to say it correctly. "I'm not going for them," I said. "There is a girl named Imani. She is the first one. I want to put a face to her before she's just a line in a report. And I want to stand in that room one time as a person who got to choose to be there instead of a person who had to be there." Soraya was quiet. Then she said, "Just promise me you'll keep your name out of it like you wanted." "That's the whole point," I said. "Nobody knows. Nobody's going to know." I believed that completely when I said it. That is the part I find almost funny now. I drove past the town I had been so poor in, the gas station where I used to buy the cheapest coffee they sold and make it last a whole library shift, the diner where the catering company had its loading bay out back. I drove onto the Wexford campus under the old stone arch with the founder's date carved into it, and I parked by pure accident in the same lot where I used to load the catering vans at 5 in the morning before donor breakfasts. I recognized the cracked corner of the curb. I recognized the slope of the asphalt. I sat there for a moment with both hands on the wheel, and I let myself feel exactly how strange it was to come back to a place in a car you owned, wearing a dress you bought, on your own free evening to a building you had once entered only through the kitchen. Then I went inside, through the front doors this time, and a woman in a silver gown handed me a tray. To understand why the tray weighed what it did, you have to go back to the autumn of 2006 when I arrived at Wexford College at 17 years old with one suitcase, a duffel bag, and a financial aid letter I had read so many times the folds had gone soft as cloth. My mother cleaned offices at night. She had cleaned offices my entire childhood, letting herself into dark buildings after everyone went home and leaving them spotless before anyone arrived. An invisible person who made other people's days possible. She had wanted college for me the way some people want air. When the letter came, the full scholarship letter, the one that used the words demonstrated need and exceptional promise in the same paragraph, she had sat down at our kitchen table and cried without making any sound, which was the only way she knew how to cry, quietly, so as not to wake anyone or trouble anyone. The scholarship covered tuition. It did not cover everything. There were fees and books, and the simple matter of living, and so within my first 3 weeks I took a job with the company that ran the college's catering, and that is how I came to spend 4 years carrying trays for my own classmates. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this sound like a tragedy, and it wasn't, not all of it. There were professors who changed the shape of my mind. There were nights in the library so quiet and so full that I could feel myself becoming someone. But the social truth of Wexford was old money, and old money has a long memory and a short kindness. And from very early on, it was decided that I was the charity case, and the person who decided it, who said it first, and said it loudest and made it stick, was Priscilla Vane. I can still see her at the donor gala in the spring of 2007. I was 18. I was in the black apron, refilling water glasses at a table where 6 of my own classmates sat in formal wear, being praised by their parents' friends. I came around with the pitcher, and Priscilla, without looking up, put her hand flat over her glass so I would understand she wanted none. And she said to the girl beside her, in a voice pitched perfectly for me to hear, "Don't make eye contact with it. It thinks you're friends." It. Not she. It. The girl beside her laughed. The whole table laughed, the easy laugh of people who have never once worried that the floor might give way beneath them. And I refilled the next glass, and the next, and I kept my eyes down, because that was the rule, and because I needed the shift, and because there was nothing in the world I could have said that would have cost Priscilla Vane one single thing. That was the social world of that college in one sentence. There is the table, and there is the person filling the glasses, and everyone agrees, gently and permanently, on who is which. It was not always loud, the deciding. That is the thing I most want you to understand about how a place like that works on a person. The cruelty I could have survived if it had only been cruelty, If it had come at me in big, obvious blows I could have braced against, it came instead in 1,000 small frictions. It was the way conversation would smooth shut when I walked up. Not hostile, just closed, a door easing to without a sound. It was being assigned a lab partner who would email the professor to ask, very politely, for a different one. It was the girls on my hall planning a trip to someone's lake house over a long weekend, and the careful way they made sure I understood I was not being invited, by talking about it warmly and constantly in front of me and never once turning to include me, so that nothing was ever actually said that I could have pointed to. You cannot file a complaint about a tone. You cannot report a pause. You simply learn, a little more each week, the exact shape of the space they have decided you are allowed to occupy. And you learn to make yourself that shape. Because the alternative is to spend every day insisting on a fullness that the whole world around you has quietly agreed not to see. I got very good at being small. That is a skill too, though not one anybody hands you an award for. I learned to take up less room at a table, to laugh a beat after everyone else so as not to seem like I thought my own reaction mattered, to answer a question in class brilliantly, and then apologize for the length of the answer. It took me years after I left to unlearn all of it. Some of it I am probably still unlearning. You do not walk out of 4 years like that clean. But I told you it wasn't all tragedy, and here's the part that mattered more than I understood at the time. After that gala, in the dish room, with my apron soaked through and my hands red from the hot water, the dining services supervisor came and found me. Her name was Hazel Quinn. She had run that kitchen for 30 years, and she had seen 100 girls like me come and go. She did not say anything sentimental. She handed me a plate, a real plate, with a full, untouched serving of the dinner the donors had eaten, the good dinner, the one we were never supposed to take, and she said, "You sit down and you eat that before you touch another dish. Nobody works in my kitchen on an empty stomach. I don't care what's happening out there in that ballroom." Out there in that ballroom. As if the ballroom were the small world and the kitchen were the large one. I have thought about the way she said that for 15 years. And there was Professor Adele Sorensen, who taught the 19th century seminar I somehow squeezed between shifts. One evening, she caught me reading the assigned text in the half hour I had between a lunch event and a dinner event, still in my catering clothes, sitting on the floor of the hallway outside her office because I had nowhere else to be. She did not ask why I was dressed like staff. She sat down on the bench across from me, an old woman folding herself down carefully, and she said, "You are the only student in my seminar who reads the footnotes. Do you know that? The footnotes are where the writer admits what they aren't sure of. Everyone else skips them because they want to sound certain. You read them because you want to understand." She tapped the cover of my book. "Remember that about yourself, Lena. When this place tries to tell you what you are, this place is very confident and very often wrong." That night, back in my dorm at 2 a.m, too wired from a double shift to sleep, I turned over the exam I had taken that week, and on the blank back of it, I wrote a menu. A menu for a food cart that did not exist, that I had no money to build, that lived nowhere but in my head. Soup in the winter, good bread, the kind of food my mother made when there was almost nothing in the house, made beautifully, made like it mattered, sold to people on a cold street who needed exactly that. I wrote the whole thing out. I priced it, I named it, and then I put it in a drawer and worked 4 more years of trays, and graduated and left, and did not look back at Wexford College for a very long time. Here is how the ground shifted 15 years later, and here is the part the woman in the silver gown could not have imagined if she had tried. In the autumn of 2024, a letter arrived at my office, not a personal letter, a development letter, the kind colleges send to alumni, except I was not on any alumni list I knew of, and I never learned how they found me. It was a plea, dressed up in good design. Wexford College, it said, was facing the most serious financial crisis in its 100-year history. Enrollment had fallen. The endowment had been managed badly through 2 bad decades. The letter used soft words, but Soraya, who reads a balance sheet the way other people read a clock, looked at the figures they were careful to bury near the back and said flatly, "Lena, this place has about 18 months, maybe less." I should have felt nothing. I had promised myself I would feel nothing about Wexford ever again. Instead, I sat with that letter for a long time, and then I made a call to a contact at the college, an old administrator I vaguely remembered, and I asked a single question. If they had to cut programs to survive, which went first? The answer came back the next day, and it was the answer I already knew in my body before I heard it. The first thing on the chopping block, the very first, was the need-based scholarship, the charity scholarship. The exact door that I had walked through at 17 years old, with one suitcase and a letter folded soft as cloth. They were going to keep the climbing wall and the wine cellar in the Alumni house, and the marble in the ballroom where I had carried trays, and they were going to close the one door that had ever opened for me and lock it behind the next girl, the next quiet kid with a night shift mother and a menu in a drawer. I called Soraya into my office and I closed the door, and I told her what I wanted to do, and she did not argue with me, which is how I knew it was right, because Soraya argues with everything. I made the gift through the college's vice president of advancement, a woman named Gail Prentice, who had the dry, steady manner of someone who has spent 30 years asking rich people for money and being lied to by half of them. The amount was $2.4 million. I want to say that number plainly, because it was not a small thing. It was the largest single thing I had ever done with money, and I did it with two conditions that I would not move on. Two conditions, I told Gail Prentice on the phone. The first is that my name never touches this. Not on a wall, not in a newsletter, not in a quiet word to a trustee. Anonymous, completely, permanently. That can be done, she said. It's unusual. Most people want their name on a wall, but it can be done. I've had my name on enough walls in that town, I said. All of them the wrong side. She did not understand that, and I did not explain it. The second condition, I went on, is that every single dollar funds full scholarships for students who cannot otherwise afford to walk in the door, not merit awards for kids who already have everything. Need, demonstrated need, the same words that were in my letter. There was a pause on the line, and then Gail Prentice said, in a different voice than the practiced one she had started with, "May I ask why anonymous, if you don't mind? Gifts like this, the name usually does some good. It brings in more. Because I don't want a single one of those students to ever feel that they owe a person," I said. "I want them to feel that they belong. Those are very different feelings. I know because I spent 4 years there feeling the first one." I signed the gift agreement at my own kitchen table, the same kind of table my mother had cried at silently, and I filed my copy, and I told no one but Soraya, and I went on with my life. I genuinely thought that was the end of it. I thought I had closed a circle quietly, in the dark, the way my mother used to clean a building so that the next person would find the lights on and never have to know who turned them on. The invitation to the Centennial Reunion Gala came the following spring, engraved on heavy cream cardstock with a little gold seal, and I almost threw it away. I held it over the recycling bin in my kitchen for a good 10 seconds. Then I thought about Imani Wells. By then she was not just a line in a report. Gail Prentice, who did not know I was the donor, only that I was an alumna interested in the scholarship program, had connected me with the first recipient for a feature in the college magazine, and Imani had written me a short, careful email that I read 4 times. She was 19. Her mother worked 2 jobs. She wanted to study public health. She wrote, near the end, a sentence that took the floor out from under me. She wrote, "I keep waiting to find out I'm not actually supposed to be here, but every morning the door still opens, so I keep going in. Every morning the door still opens, so I keep going in." I had been that sentence. I had lived inside that sentence for 4 years, so I did not throw the invitation away. I told myself a careful, modest story about why I was going. I would go for 1 evening. I would meet Imani in person, just once, so she would be real to me. I would stand in that ballroom as a guest, on my own terms, the way you might revisit a place where something painful happened, just to prove to yourself that it no longer has teeth. And then I would leave, anonymous, with my name still off every wall, and never go back again. I drove up. I parked in the catering lot by accident. A woman in a silver gown handed me a tray. And then, because I had stayed, the evening began to do to me exactly what that place had always done. It began to make me small, gently, with a smile, one hook at a time. After the tray, Priscilla did not walk away for good. She came back, a few minutes later, having apparently been informed by someone that I was on the guest list, and her whole manner rearranged itself into a performance of graciousness that was somehow worse than the insult. "Oh, you're an alum," she said, drawing the word out as though it were a small, adorable surprise. "Of course you are. I'm so sorry, I just assumed. You can absolutely stay. Just, you know." She made a little gesture that took in my dress, my shoes, the whole of me. "Keep a low profile and you'll be completely comfortable. Nobody's going to bother you." Nobody's going to bother you! As though I were a nervous animal that might be spooked by the bright people. Grayson drifted over with 2 glasses of wine, handing one to his wife, not offering one to me, and he looked me up and down with that pleasant emptiness and said, "Halsey, right? Lena Halsey." Wow. So what are you up to these days? Still doing the party thing, catering, events, that whole world? And he said it kindly. That was the thing. He said it the way you would ask a person whether they had managed to stay sober, with a soft, hopeful, encouraging lift, as though the best he could imagine for me was that I had stayed afloat. Something like that, I said. Every kindness in that room had a hook in it. Every single one. A few of the others drifted over while Priscilla held court. The way people gather near the center of a room, a woman I half remembered, Bitsy someone, took my hand in both of hers and told me how brave it was that I had come back. Brave, as though I were a soldier returning to a battlefield rather than an alum at a party. And I understood that in her mind it was brave, because in her mind this was still the room where I belonged at the edges, and to walk into it at all was an act of nerve. A man whose name I never knew asked me with real curiosity whether the food tonight was, and here he paused delicately, whether it was being handled by my company, as though the most natural thing in the world would be for me to have catered my own reunion, to have come back in the only capacity the room could imagine for me. I told him no, it was not my company. He looked almost disappointed, as though I had failed to be the thing he had so kindly imagined for me. I drank a glass of water, and I said very little, and I watched them, and the strangest feeling came over me, which was not anger and was not hurt. It was a kind of clinical wonder. These were not bad people, most of them. They would have told you sincerely that they were good people, and by the measures they used, they were. They gave to charities. They were kind to their dogs. They simply could not see me, had never been able to see me, because seeing me would have required them to ask a question about themselves that they had decided, long ago and forever, not to ask. And so they had built, around the inconvenient fact of me, a small, comfortable story, and they had been living inside it so long that the story had become, to them, just the way things were. I excused myself and walked down a side hallway to get away from them, and that is where I found the wall. The college had hung framed class photographs the whole length of the corridor, one for every graduating year, and I stopped in front of mine. I found the year. I found the photograph. Rows of faces in caps and gowns on the library steps in the spring of 2010. Priscilla front and center. Grace and two people over. Faces I knew. Faces I had served. Faces that had looked through me for 4 years. I was not in it. I had been working the night they took the class composite. There had been an event, a dinner, and I had been on the crew, and so when my own class gathered on the library steps to be remembered forever, I was 400 yards away in an apron carrying a tray. 15 years later, the college had a wall with every single member of my class on it, beautifully framed, and I was not there. I almost laughed, standing in that empty hallway. Almost. It was such a perfect, accidental summary of the entire thing. They had a wall of everyone but me, and in 18 months, that wall and that whole building would have come down, if not for the woman standing in front of it whom they had not bothered to photograph. I decided, in that hallway, that I would find Imani, say hello, and leave. I would not stay for the program. I had seen enough. I turned to go back, and the lights in the ballroom dimmed and brightened, the signal for the speeches to begin, and a voice asked everyone to please find their seats. I want to tell you about the decision I made then, because it is the most important thing I did all night, and it happened entirely on the inside, where no one could see it. I had carried a speech for 15 years, not a real speech, not one I had ever planned to give, but a fantasy speech, the kind you compose in the shower and on long drives, the kind where you walk into the room that diminished you and you tell them, in perfect, devastating sentences, exactly who you became and exactly what they failed to see. In my version, I told them about the food cart, and the first catering contract, and the night we did an event for 900 people without a single mistake. In my version, Priscilla's face crumpled and she understood, finally, the magnitude of her error. Standing at the edge of that ballroom, with the lights going down, I felt the speech rise up in me, hot and ready, and I made myself put it down. Because I understood something, finally, that I had not understood at 17 or at 25. The speech was a way of asking them to grade me again. It was me, walking back up to the table where they sat and saying, look how well I did. Please revise your assessment. And the moment I did that, the moment I performed my success for their approval, I would have handed them back the very power I had spent 15 years taking away from myself, stone by stone. I would have made my life's work into an argument addressed to Priscilla Vane. I would not do it. Whatever happened in that room, I decided, I would not perform. Not gratitude, not triumph, not the speech, nothing. I would be exactly as much myself as I was in my own office, at the head of my own table, which is to say, complete, and not waiting for anyone's verdict. I found a place to stand near the side of the stage, and as I did, Gail Prentice saw me. I had never met her in person. We had only spoken on the phone, and to her, I was an interested alumna, a magazine contact, nothing more. But she was a development officer at a gala, and development officers spend galas scanning the room, and something in her scan snagged on me and stopped. I watched her go still. I watched her look from me to the program in her hand, to the stage, and back to me, and I watched the color of her face change as the arithmetic completed itself behind her eyes. She crossed to me quickly, leaned in close, and spoke very low. "You're her," she said. "You're the gift." It was not a question. I did not answer. I did not need to. "Lena," she said, and the use of my first name told me she had known the whole time who the donor was and had simply kept the wall up exactly as I asked, a professional to the bone. "Dean Beck wants to thank the donor tonight. From the stage." I told him your terms. I told him. Anonymous, no exceptions. "But Lena, he's been the dean here for 20 years, and this college is the thing he loves most in the world, and you just saved its life. I cannot promise you what that man is going to do when he gets up there with a microphone and the people who saved his college sitting in the dark in front of him. I'm sorry. I should have warned you. I didn't know you'd be standing right here." "It's all right," I said. And the strange thing is that it was, because I had already made my decision. Whatever the dean did was the dean's to do. My only job was the one I had given myself, to not perform. That I could keep, no matter what happened on that stage. I looked away from Gail, out across the seated room, and I found Imani Wells. She was at a side table near the back, the kind of table they put the people who don't quite belong, and she was sitting very straight in a dress I could tell she had agonized over, and she was holding her water glass with both hands, the way you hold something when you are not sure you are allowed to be where you are. I knew that grip. I had invented that grip. She was the only person in that entire ballroom I had actually come to see, and looking at her, I felt the whole evening rearrange itself into proportion. Everything else, the tray, the silver gown, the wall of photographs, all of it was noise. That girl, holding her glass with both hands, was the signal. I picked up a single glass of water from a passing tray, not to serve, to drink, and I turned toward the stage as Dean Conrad Beck stepped up to the microphone. He was an old man now, Dean Beck, stooped a little, with white hair and the kind of half-glasses that ride down the nose, and he had the careful, unhurried voice of someone who has given a great many speeches and learned not to waste words. He thanked the alumni for coming. He spoke for a few minutes about the 100 years of the college, the founders, the generations, and then his voice changed, and the room felt it change, the way a room always feels it when a speaker stops performing and starts telling the truth. "I am going to say something now," he said, "that I have been instructed not to say. I have been instructed for a year, and I have decided, standing up here tonight, looking at all of you, that I am not able to follow that instruction any longer, and I will ask forgiveness for it afterward from the one person it concerns." The room went very quiet. I felt the quiet on my skin. "A year ago," Dean Beck said, "this college was dying. I want to use that word because it is the true word. We were not struggling. We were not facing headwinds. We were dying. We had, by the most honest estimate our board could produce, about 18 months before we would have closed these doors for the last time in our 100-year history." He paused. And then one person, one single person, made a gift of $2,400,000. Restricted. Every dollar of it directed not at a new building, not at a wall, not at a wing with a name on it, but at scholarships. Need-based scholarships for students who could not otherwise afford to walk through our front door. That gift is the reason we are standing in this room tonight. That gift is the reason there will be a Wexford College for your children. It is not an exaggeration to say that gift is the reason this 100th year is not our last. I heard around the room the soft sounds people make, the small intakes of breath, the murmurs. Priscilla, 3 tables away, was nodding along with the warm, approving expression people wear for other people's generosity. "The donor asked to remain anonymous," Dean Beck said, "permanently, and I have honored that for a year, but I find tonight that I cannot stand in front of the people this gift saved and thank a blank space. I cannot let this college express its gratitude to nobody. It is not right. So I am going to break my word, just this once, and I will take whatever I have coming for it." He looked up from his notes, and he looked out across the room, slowly, past the head tables, past the board, past the silver gowns and the dark suits, all the way to the side where I was standing with a glass of water in my hand. "She is in this room tonight," he said. 15 years ago, some of you in this room knew her. Some of you sat in classes with her. She attended this college on exactly the kind of need-based scholarship that her gift now funds. She was, I am told, on the catering staff for most of her years here, which is to say that some of you were served dinner by the woman who would one day save this institution's life. His voice was not unkind, but it was not soft either. It was steady, and it landed like a steady thing. "I would ask Lena Halsey to allow us finally to see her." The room turned. I have tried many times since to describe what it is to have 200 faces turned toward you at once, and I have never found the right words for it. So I will tell you only what I noticed, because what I noticed surprised me. I did not notice the attention. I noticed Priscilla. She had turned with everyone else automatically, her warm, approving expression still half on her face, looking for the donor, the great benefactor, the important person Dean Beck was naming. And then her eyes found me, the woman by the wall, the woman in the plain dark dress and the flat shoes, the woman she had handed a tray to 90 minutes earlier and told to be useful. And I watched the approving expression fall off her face the way a picture falls off a wall when the nail finally lets go, all at once, with nothing to catch it. "That's not," she said. I was close enough to hear it, though it was barely a sound. "That's not her. She was catering." I did not stand to be admired. I want to be clear about that, because it would be easy to make this the triumphant moment, the moment I had supposedly waited for, and it wasn't. I stood because a dean I respected had asked me to let the college see me, and because 200 people, who had spent an evening, or in some cases 4 years, deciding what I was, were finally, by pure accident, looking at something true. I set my water glass down on the linen station beside the empty tray that was still sitting there where I had left it, and I stood up straight and I let them look. I did not speak. The microphone was 40 feet away, and I made no move toward it. I had decided I would not perform, and silence, it turned out, was the one thing in that room that no one could argue with. I met Dean Beck's eyes across all those heads, and I inclined my head once, a small bow, the kind you give a person who has done something difficult and decent at cost to himself. And then I simply stood there, in the quiet, and let 15 years of a story about a charity case come apart in the open air, where everyone could watch it go. The program ended a few minutes later, and then the room broke open around me. They came in a wave, and the speed of it was the most educational thing about the entire night. An hour and a half earlier, I had been invisible, then I had been the help, then I had been a charity case, told to keep a low profile so I would not embarrass anyone. Now I was surrounded by people pressing forward to touch my arm, to say my name, to tell me how absolutely wonderful, how incredible, how they had always known there was something special about me. Grayson got to me first, because Grayson had the long, easy stride of a man who has never had to wait for anything. "Lena! My God!" he said, and he actually put his hand to his chest. "We had no idea. Genuinely no idea. This is extraordinary, what you've done for the school. Listen." He leaned in, lowering his voice to the confidential register of a man making an offer. "We have to get you on the board. The Alumni board. Priscilla chairs it. We would be honored, truly honored, to have someone of your caliber. It's the least we can do. The least we can do. An hour earlier, the most they could do had been to let me stay if I kept a low profile. An hour ago, I was the help," I said. I did not say it with heat. I said it the way you read a number off a page. Now I'm an honor. Same people, same night, same dress. He laughed uncertainly, looking for the joke, and when he did not find one, his smile went thin and confused, and he stepped back. Then Priscilla was there. I will give her this much. She came. A weaker version of her would have left, would have developed a sudden headache and slipped out a side door. Priscilla came and stood in front of me, and I could see the enormous effort it was costing her to arrange her face. And for 1 second, I almost felt for her, because I knew that face. I had worn the cousin of that face for 4 years, the face of a person performing composure they do not feel. "Lena," she said, "I owe you an apology. I obviously did not recognize you. And if I had known, if I'd had any idea who you'd become, I never in a million years would have—" She stopped because she heard it as it came out of her mouth. I watched her hear it. To her credit, something in her actually flinched. "There it is," I said quietly. That's not what I. It is, though, I said. You're not sorry for what you did to a girl with a tray. You'd do that again tomorrow to the next girl with a tray without a second thought. You're sorry that this particular girl with a tray turned out to have $2.5 million and a name the dean would say from a stage. You're not apologizing for being cruel. You're apologizing for misjudging the market. Her mouth opened and nothing came out. I'm going to tell you the thing I actually came here understanding, I said. And then I'm going to go talk to someone I like. You would have been kind to the donor. You'd be falling over yourself to be kind to the donor. You're doing it right now. What I needed 15 years ago was for you to be decent to the student. Just decent. Not generous, not warm, not friends. Decent. And that one was free. It never cost $1. You just decided I wasn't worth it. I picked my water glass back up off the linen. That's the only thing I'd want you to actually understand. But I've learned not to need you to understand things. I turned, and there was a young server near me, a kid of maybe 20 in the same black apron I had worn 1,000 nights, holding a tray of empty glasses, watching this whole thing with wide eyes. I put my water glass on his tray, gently, and I said, "Thank you. Long night. You're doing great." And he blinked at me, because nobody at a gala ever says that to the person clearing the glasses. And I knew, because I had been him, exactly how much that one sentence would carry him through the next 3 hours. Then I walked past the board table, past Priscilla and Grayson and all of it, toward the back of the room, where a girl was sitting very straight at a side table, holding her water glass with both hands. I want to tell you about the cost, because there was one, and because the stories that pretend there isn't a cost are lying to you. I sat down at Imani's table, and within a few minutes, Hazel Quinn found us. Hazel, who had retired from the dining service years ago, but had been invited back as an honored long-service employee, and had been sitting, of course, at one of the back tables herself, because the college's instincts about who belonged where had not changed in 3 decades. And then, slowly, leaning on a cane now, Professor Adele Sorensen made her way over, because she had seen me stand, and she had remembered, after 15 years, the girl who read the footnotes. So there we were. The woman who fed me when I was hungry, the woman who told me I was not what the place said I was, the girl who was living, right now, inside the exact sentence I had once lived inside. And me, in the middle, 36 years old, the donor, the founder, the charity case. And I looked around that small table, and I did the arithmetic of the whole night. And it was very simple. The people who had ever actually mattered to me in connection with that college would have fit, then and now, at one small table at the back of the room. 3 of them. That was the entire list. 15 years of wanting that ballroom to see me, and the only seats that had ever held anything real were the 4 we were sitting in. That was the cost. Not the cruelty I had made my peace with. The cost was the years. The cost was every drive when I had rehearsed the speech. Every imagined version of Priscilla's face crumpling. Every ounce of myself I had spent, quietly, in the back of my own mind, on people who were never going to be worth a single ounce of it. I had given them rent in my own head for 15 years, and they had never even known they were living there. Imani was looking at me with a question she was clearly trying to decide whether she was allowed to ask, and finally she asked it. They told us the donor was anonymous, she said, that whoever it was didn't want anyone to know. Why would you do something that big and not want your name on it? I thought about how to answer her honestly. Because when I was where you are, I said, I felt like I owed the place. Like I'd been let in as a favor, and I had to spend the whole 4 years being grateful enough to deserve the favor, and I never once got to just be a student. Just belong. And I didn't want you to feel that. I didn't want you sitting in some scholarship dinner someday feeling like you had to perform your gratitude for a face on a wall. I shrugged. The light staying on isn't a favor. Somebody did you. It's what the place is for. You don't owe anybody for the door being open. The door is supposed to be open. That's the whole point of a door. Hazel Quinn made a low sound of approval into her wine, and Professor Sorensen reached across and put her old hand over mine on the table and did not say anything, which from her was the loudest thing she could have done. And I realized sitting there that somewhere on the drive up, somewhere between the gas station and the stone arch, I had stopped needing the room's apology. I had genuinely stopped. I had come, I think, still half wanting it, still carrying the speech in my back pocket, and somewhere on that flat brown road it had quietly fallen out. And I had not noticed it was gone until exactly this moment, sitting at a small table with the only 3 people who had ever told me the truth about myself, and finding that the absence of that old hunger did not feel like loss. It felt like setting down a tray I had been carrying for 15 years. The weeks after the gala did what consequence always does, which is to keep moving on its own once you stop pushing it. The college, through Gail Prentice, asked me to join the board of trustees. The real one, not the alumni board. Priscilla's husband sent a long, warm email about the alumni board, which I did not answer. There were 2 or 3 other emails from classmates who had not spoken to me in 15 years and who now wrote as though we had been close, suggesting lunch, suggesting collaboration, suggesting, in one remarkable case, a partnership opportunity. I read them all and answered none of them, not out of spite, but because I had finally learned to tell the difference between people who want you and people who want access to you. And the difference, it turns out, is loud once you know how to hear it. I met with Gail Prentice and Dean Beck a few weeks later in his office, the same office I had once sat outside of on the hallway floor in my catering clothes. I told them I would not take the board seat. Dean Beck nodded slowly, as though he had expected that, and said he understood, and that he owed me an apology for breaking my anonymity, that he had wrestled with it and decided wrong, perhaps, but had not been able to do otherwise. I told him the truth, which was that I had stopped being angry about it somewhere around the time I sat down at Imani's table, and that I thought, on balance, he had done a brave thing badly, which was still better than doing a cowardly thing well. Then I told them what I did want. I wanted to keep funding the scholarship. I would not stop. The closing of that door was the whole reason I had come, and I was not going to let it close just because the secret was out. But the terms would change now that there was no secret left to protect. Put my name on it, I said, not on the building, not on a wall in the ballroom, on the application. Gail looked up. On the scholarship application itself, where the students see it. The Lena Halsey Scholarship, in one sentence under it, that a woman who came here on this exact scholarship, who worked the catering crew to pay for what it didn't cover, who was called the charity case to her face, came back and funded it. So the next kid filling out that form at a kitchen table at midnight knows that somebody like them got in and got out and came back. Not to feel grateful, to feel possible. Dean Beck took his glasses off and pressed the bridge of his nose, and Gail Prentice, the woman who had spent 30 years being lied to by donors, looked at me for a long moment and then said simply, "That's the best use of a name I've heard in this job." I also told them the rules. The students would choose their mentors, not the other way around, because I remembered being assigned to people who saw me as a project. No donor-named dinners, where the kids had to come and perform gratitude over a plate of food. And the catering crew at every college event would be paid a real wage and fed a real meal on every shift, written into the contract, because Hazel Quinn had taught me in a dish room 20 years ago what it does to a person to be fed when they are hungry by someone who acts like it is the most ordinary thing in the world. Priscilla, I am told, stepped down as chair of the alumni board that winter, though I never learned the details and did not ask. She sent me one note on the same heavy cream cardstock as the invitation, and I read the first line, which began, "I have been doing a great deal of thinking," and then I put it in a drawer, unfinished. Not torn up, not burned, just set aside, the way you set down a thing you are finished with. I bear her no ill will. I simply have no more room for her, in my head or anywhere else. The rent's been canceled. There was one more conversation I should tell you about because it surprised me. About a month after the gala, a man named Tobias, who had been part of Priscilla's circle in college and had never once been anything but cool to me, asked to meet for coffee. And I almost said no. And then something in his email made me say yes. He did not ask me for anything. That was the surprise. He sat across from me in a coffee shop, and he said he had been at the gala, and he had watched the whole thing, the tray and the stage and all of it, and he had not been able to sleep right since. He said he had spent 15 years telling himself he was just a bystander to how I was treated, that he had never said any of the cruel things himself, and that watching me stand up that night, he had finally understood that the bystander is the one who makes it possible, that cruelty needs an audience the way a fire needs air, and that he had been the air. He apologized for that. He did not ask to be forgiven, and he did not ask to be friends. He just wanted to name it, he said, out loud to the person it had been done to, because he had realized that never naming it was its own kind of cowardice. I thanked him. I meant it. It is a rare thing, a person who comes to you not to be absolved, but simply to tell the truth and let you do with it what you will. I do not know if we will be friends. But I left that coffee shop lighter, and I have thought since that his was the only apology of the whole season that was actually about me, and not about the apologizer. That is the shape of how it resolved, if you want a map of it. The click, closed, a door I will not be reopening. Priscilla, a permanent polite distance, no war, no reconciliation, just distance, and the others, the real ones wide open. Professor Sorensen and I have lunch every month now. I drive up, and she tells me what she's reading, and still, at 68, reads me the footnotes. Hazel Quinn came to my company's holiday party and held court in my actual kitchen, the commercial one, and told my staff stories about me at 19 that I would have paid good money to suppress. And Imani is going to be all right. Better than all right. I walked her across the quad that night, after the gala, the long way, past the old loading dock where I used to bring the catering vans in at 5 in the morning, and I pointed it out to her, the dock, the cracked curb, the back kitchen door, and I told her that was the door I used to come in through. She looked at it, and then she looked at me and she said, "And tonight you came in the front." And I said, "No. Tonight I found out it was always the same building. There was never a front door and a back door, there was just a building, and a lot of people very invested in telling me which one I was allowed to use." We stood there a while in the cold, then we walked back, and I drove home, 2 hours south, in a car I owned, on my own free evening, having finally, completely, stopped asking that place for permission to exist. So here's what I would say to you. If you have ever been the person filling the glasses in a room full of people who decided, gently and permanently, who you were, the people who are most certain that you do not belong are almost never looking at the thing that actually holds the room up. They are looking at your shoes, your dress, your job, your accent, the door you came in through. They are very confident, and they are very often wrong, and the most dangerous thing you can do with your one life is to believe them and spend it trying to make them revise the grade. You do not owe your name to anyone who only learned to say it once it became useful to them. And you do not owe your gratitude to a room for letting you stand in it. If you built something, you built it. If you held something up, you held it up. The people sipping their wine at the good tables do not get to decide, after the fact, whether you were ever real. And the other thing, the thing I most want you to take with you, decency is the rent that is always due from all of us to all of us, no matter who is holding the tray. It costs nothing. It is the cheapest thing in any room. Be the person who is decent to the student, not just charming to the donor, because you will almost never know in the moment which one you are talking to. And it should not matter. And the fact that it so often does is the whole quiet tragedy I have spent this story trying to describe. I do not hate them. I want you to hear that because it is the part that took me the longest to mean. I am not telling you this from a place of revenge. The girl with the tray did not get her revenge. She got something better and slower and harder to win. She got herself back. I still have the menu, by the way, the one I wrote on the back of an exam at 2 in the morning when I was 19, in a dorm room I could barely afford to be sleeping in. Soup in the winter, good bread, food made beautifully like it mattered for people who needed exactly that. It is framed now in the lobby of my company, the only thing on that wall, and the staff think it is a quirk, and I let them think so. It is not a quirk. It is the only document from those 4 years that ever told the truth about who I was. Not the financial aid letter, not the class photograph I'm not in. A menu for a thing that did not exist yet, written by a girl who already knew, somewhere under all that being told what she was, exactly who she would turn out to be. Take care of yourself. And the next time someone hands you an empty tray and tells you to be useful, you go ahead and hold it as long as you like. You will know, the way I knew, that it is the lightest thing in the room. Good night.